Thanks, Chrissy. I'd just like to thank the conference organisers, especially the conference sponsors, Tribeca and Argonaut, both shareholders, very supportive shareholders, hopefully very happy shareholders. The presentation has been lodged on the ASX. It's also available on our website if you'd like to read the disclaimer, and the full resource statement is at the end of the slides also. So, still in nickel, after Scott's presentation in Vietnam, we're here in West Australia. Lunnon Metals is an ASX-listed nickel explorer and an aspiring nickel producer. We're based in West Australia. As you've heard throughout the conference, Western Australia is a centre of excellence for mining and exploration. No surprise, it also has a world-leading regulatory framework within which we all operate. So a lot of the ESG concerns, a lot of the transition to ESG, already very heavily regulated and looked after by the West Australian government. Our assets are in Kambalda. Kambalda is one of the world's most famous nickel districts. It's certainly Australia's most prolific nickel district. 1.6 million tonnes of nickel metal has been mined in Kambalda since it was founded in 1966 by WMC Resources, and I'll show you in a moment. It has an amazing and unrivalled ability to continue to yield discoveries. Because of that long history, 55 plus years of mining in Kambalda, there's significant existing infrastructure in place, and we can leverage off that infrastructure. I'll show you that in a moment, but it means our impact on the environment for the activities we plan is low, but while our impact is low, the value of our assets is high. The mineral resource grades above 3%. We believe we'll be able to produce a premium concentrate because of that infrastructure, because of that existing history, and we're on granted mining leases. The lead time to move from being an explorer to a producer is short, and the capital required to do that is minimal. And all of that has a positive impact on those communities that Chrissy mentioned. Chrissy yesterday was telling everyone she's a Kalgoorlie girl. I've lived and worked in Kambalda, Kalgoorlie for 8 years. The certainty, the knowledge that you've got confident projects that are cash flow positive is good for the community, it's good for certainty. It includes jobs, spent by us, spent by our employees, and that's the confidence and certainty that these regional communities really crave. So for those of you less familiar with the geography of Western Australia, we're headquartered in Perth. Our assets, Kambalda, are about 600 kilometres east of Perth, just near Kalgoorlie. We listed in June 2021. We've had a very successful nearly 2 years now. And that success has been underpinned by a discovery made called Baker. I'll show you some detail on Baker in a moment. We've actually added nearly 50,000 tonnes of nickel metal to the inventory we had when we listed in June 21. It's a 125% increase. We've done it at a very competitive discovery cost as well. And as you no doubt would imagine, there's been a lot of news flow associated with drilling and making that discovery. We've drilled nearly 50 kilometres of drilling. We've reprocessed nearly 11 kilometres of historical core. We've got over 500 kilometres of historical WMC core that we have access to. We can reprocess, recut, relog. It allows us to convert historical remnants from WMC days into modern compliant JORC resources. But we haven't just relied on the drill bit. We've grown by acquisition from our major shareholder, Goldfields. We acquired the last 2 nickel mines in Kambalda that had never previously been transacted, Silver Lake and Fisher last year, and in parallel to that we raised $30 million. So to set ourselves up for the future, but more important, or just as important, we've recruited an executive leadership team that has a deep operational, technical, legal and commercial history, not just in mining, but actually in Kambalda mining. So we've set ourselves up for the future with our asset base, with our funding, and with our leadership team. Just a little history on Kambalda. WMC that found the district, as I said, in the late 90s, early 2000s, made a strategic decision to exit its ownership of its mines in Kambalda, both nickel and gold. Kambalda is also a very significant gold camp, currently in the hands of Goldfields. And it sold those nickel mines to 3 junior companies, Mincor, Panoramic and Independence. And the chart on the left shows you 3 pairs of bubbles. The smaller bubble in each case is the amount of nickel metal that WMC had mined to the point of sale, and the larger bubble is all the nickel that's been mined to date. And the difference is obviously the amount of nickel that WMC left on the table. This is testament to the amazing ability of the Kambalda district to yield new discoveries, extensions of existing resources, Our assets at the time of that strategic exit had already been shut down. The table on the right shows you they shut in the 80s and early 90s. They were significant assets in their own right. They produced 250,000 tonnes of nickel, but they were shut when WMC exited, so they got sold with the gold to Goldfields and essentially have laid fallow until we put our foot on them in 2015 as a private company. So our goal is quite simply to have a larger second green bubble and enjoy and replicate the success of those three junior companies in the last nickel boom. So we like Kambalda for that reason. Obviously, Kambalda's pretty topical at the moment. It's a current M&A hotspot. Wyloo Metals, which is Andrew Forrest's private mining investment vehicle, is busy in an on-market takeover of Mincor Resources, who are our nearest neighbour and the only other ASX-listed nickel company that has assets in Kambalda. That's obviously the goalposts have moved quite considerably on that, but the reason we like it, the reason Andrew Forrest likes it, because it is such a globally significant nickel camp. It has been and will continue to be a key source of strategic nickel sulfides into the future because of that discovery record, and we're well placed. We've got just under 3 million tonnes at over 3% nickel for just under 80,000 nickel tonnes in mineral resource. Notwithstanding that's a great start, we still think our tenement base is underexplored, and I'll show you some of that towards the end of the talk. So this is how our assets stack up. Baker is the discovery we've made. Baker now, having been quite recently discovered, is our most mature asset. Because it's a very attractive asset, the grade is very high, and we focus very strongly on it. We've advanced the drilling, the quantification of risk, the test work, and the resource study work, and we've also advanced the permitting quite considerably at Baker. So it's actually gone past Foster, which was the asset we listed on with 39,000 nickel tonnes. It's an old historical mine, Foster, but Baker's gone past Foster in terms of our focus and our consideration. But Foster in its own right is a really significant asset, 57,000 nickel tonnes at just under 3%. And then the deal we did last year, as I mentioned with Goldfields, brought Silver Lake and Fisher into the portfolio. That enables us to keep that news flow going. It enables us to keep being really aggressive. And as Eddie Riggs said this morning, if you listen to his keynote address, you can't find anything unless the drill rigs are turning. So Silver Lake and Fisher just open up the exploration portfolio for us again as we advance our more mature assets through to permitting and aspiring production. So a little bit of detail on Baker. Like I said, we found this. It's 1 million tonnes at 3.3%, 24,000 nickel tonnes. Of that sits in the indicated category, and all the indicated that's currently the subject of a PFS that should be completed in the next 4 to 6 weeks sits in the top 200 metres. So it's very shallow. Because it's shallow, we've been able to drill it really aggressively. We've put 15 kilometres of RC, 5 kilometres of diamond into this deposit. So as I said, we've quantified the geology, the metallurgy, the geotechnical aspects. We've quantified that risk. We believe it's low. We think the value of the product is going to be high. We've done some initial metallurgical test work, which we reported last year. We're doing much more detailed metallurgical test work currently. The indications are it will produce a premium concentrate, high in nickel, copper and cobalt, and very topically, with respect to the recent developments with Wyloo and Mincor, very low in contaminants, particularly arsenic. And as I said, we can leverage off the existing infrastructure. This part of Kambalda has been mined for 50 plus years. There's haul roads, there's dumps, there's access ways. Our disturbance from this point on is very minimal, and significantly, there's an open pit about 450 metres away. That's a gold open pit. We have access to that. That can be our portal site. So we can get to from surface to the top of our ore body very quickly. It's on granted M's. The lead time to move, as I said, from explorer to producer is extremely short, and the capital should be quite modest. I have to keep reminding myself, because we've been so focused on Baker, that Foster in its own right is, as I said, a significant asset. 57,000 nickel tonnes. Foster shut in the 90s. It produced 61,000 nickel tonnes before it shut. We've got an inventory now of 57,000 nickel tonnes. Again, it's on granted M's. Again, there's a lot of existing infrastructure. This mine is flooded, but we've already permitted to dewater and discharge that water with a view to re-enter, to explore. But when we do that, the ability to pivot from exploration to production will be very easy should we make that choice. We'll move the study focus from Baker onto Foster. when Baker is finished and reported, and a big focus of that study will be to look at whether we do Baker first, whether we do Baker with Foster, and look at the option value of the nickel we have in the ground in a very strategic belt in Kambalda, which is obviously, as I said, currently an M&A hotspot. So last year we acquired the last 2 nickel mines. This is a map of Kambalda. The southern half of the Kambalda Dome, the famous Kambalda Dome, outlined in white, shaded red, is the tenement package where we have the nickel rights. It came with 2 nickel mines, Fisher and Silver Lake. They produced 160,000 nickel tonnes between them prior to shutting in the 80s. The northern half of the Kambalda Dome sits within the Mincor, subject to Wailu's takeover offer. There's a yellow line traced on the surface on the aerial map. That is a key geological contact. All the nickel that's ever been found in Kambalda, 1.6 million tonnes of nickel metal, sits at or extremely close to that contact. And you can see the blue dots are the historical and current operations of Mincor Resources hugging that contact. That contact obviously runs through our tenement package, and the area we're particularly excited about is circled here. There's an area there where there's 2 to 3 square kilometres where there's no drilling, not just no drilling by WMC, no drilling at all. And that's a function of how WMC went about exploring its ore bodies. It found them, it got underground, got very close and personal, but it left a lot of nickel ahead of itself, as evidenced by those junior companies' success on the chart I showed you earlier. So we're really excited about that. We're doing some seismic work. There's a seismic slice that was done by independents back in 2008 and published in 2012. And for the geophysicists in the room, hopefully you can see the channels that's gone currently on Mincor's ground, tracking south onto our ground. We're doing our own seismic. We're very excited about that. It kicked off last month. This is the rig on the Salt Lake. It looks pretty wet. It doesn't take much rain up in Kambalda for that lake to get inundated. But they successfully completed the survey. We haven't seen the data yet, but we understand it's clean. If we get any obvious targets, any obvious reflectors that line up with any of those channels coming off Mincor's ground, we'll be very keen to get the drill rigs there as quickly as possible and test them. On the left of this slide are all the things we ticked off in the March quarter. It was a busy quarter. As I said, very much the focus of the June quarter is the Baker PFS. We'll report that. That will include reporting of ore reserves significantly. That will enable us to initiate offtake discussions with offtake partners. The most notable and the closest is Nickel West with their concentrator that's only 20 kilometres north of Baker. And we'll continue to permit Baker and Foster to push it ahead to de-risk those projects while we start then hopefully generating news flow from our new Silver Lake and Fisher drilling activities once that targeting is complete. So busy last quarter, lots to do in the June quarter, lots to do for the rest of 23. Quick look at the corporate overview. As I said, when you look at the 10 people on the board and the executive, 5 of those people collectively lived and worked in Kambalda for WMC and Goldfields for probably a total of over 50 years between them. We got long and deep experience in the operations, the technical, the geological, commercial, and legal aspects of running a mining business in Kambalda. Just under 200 million shares on issue, bouncing around about $1.10 at the moment. We were 90 cents before Wailu launched the offer on Mincor Resources. So we capitalised about 220 million, no debt, still plenty of cash left from that raising in April last year. So we've got a management team in place, we've got the cash at hand, and most importantly, we've got the assets in a really historic and actually prolific nickel district. Just on the register of note, Goldfields are 34%, and still our major shareholder. The founders of the company have about 30%. The top 20 round out around 80%. So it's great for downside protection, also great for protection should a suitor come calling, looking to add Lunnon Metals assets to their portfolio. So to finish up, it's a great time to be in nickel. We've got 4 nickel mines. We've made 1 discovery. We've been really aggressive. We've been rewarded for being aggressive. We've increased our mineral resource base. It's a fantastic place to do business, as Chrissy has mentioned, as other presenters have mentioned. Kalgoorlie, Kambalda is a very good place to run a mining business, but fundamentally what underpins the value of Lunnon Metals is its address in Kambalda. And I think we're seeing with the current corporate activities that are happening in the market, that value really is beginning to win out. So thank you very much for your time. Do look us up on social media. Just a warning, hashtag LM8, which is our hashtag, is also the hashtag for Lionel Messi to win his 8th Ballon d'Or. So if you type it into Twitter, don't be surprised if it's not about geology, it's not about Kambalda. And someone said to me that most West Australians think that image, looking at that image and saying, who's that? How has he won so many Oscars? Who is it? Well, there you go, there's a perfect example. So Lionel Messi, supposedly the world's best footballer, he's won 7 Ballon d'Ors and he's up for his 8th. Captain, who is he? Lionel Messi. Anyway, thank you very much for your attention. Please come and see us if you've got any further questions before the conference finishes this afternoon. Thank you very much.